just as we have seen that, new systems or simplification, or when there are huge goals or mandates in front of the management, there's sometimes pushback and resistance from the workforce, which creates sort of time lag, or, creates, does not align with the goals and the speed at which a company wants to grow. But at the same time, during your course of research for your book, Work Made Easy, have you also seen the flip side, which is that companies set in old systems who have got some legacy issues, or they have a set way of functioning, are resistant to, quick adaptability? And I often hear about things like, this is how things are done here. Is that also true?
The very term legacy itself, I think that the word itself has to be relooked at. I think every organization post-COVID has to be looked at as a legacy organization. But I know what you mean. There are certain organizations who may react very differently from, let's say, the tech companies that we see in Bangalore or Hyderabad. Now, I think having said that, I think it's essential to recognize, Sharmila, that the need for simplification and efficiency, I think, is something which is universal, regardless of whether you call an organization a legacy organization or not. The other thing, what you've seen is that, and it's not only in the research, Sharmila, but even in the work that we've been doing post-COVID especially, is that even if you work with an organization who can be kind of labeled legacy, the beauty is that, and the trick really is to find somebody in the management who is not as resistant to simplification as the remaining people on the board itself. And it's always that person or that group of persons who kind of champions your case. And I think the challenge, or rather the opportunity there, is really in overcoming that initial inertia and fostering a culture, I think, with these 2-3 champions that you find, a culture which actually values kind of, I would say, innovation and continuous improvement. I think all organizations, even today, if you ask me, where is it going in the future? You can't say. It's continuous improvement, right? So, and this essentially, I think, requires one to be very, very clear about the communication that we are sending out from us as a consultant, from us as an author, or even within the management. And this may involve, like you mentioned, employees also. This actually may involve engaging, I think, employees at all levels of the organization. So there's a sense of ownership which sets in very early. And seeing that inertia, I think people eventually kind of join the crowd, and I think innovation and a culture of continuous improvement actually sets in. So I mean, there could be certain industries where this could be high, resistance to change or resistance to simplicity could be high. But I think there is potential to gradually shift organizational culture towards embracing change, and we better do that because there's been so much of change in recent times. And I think adopting a more streamlined process. Who doesn't like a simplified process? Everyone likes, right? All users like that.
Yes, so, just as you said, that the pandemic has sort of clearly disrupted and redefined how work is going to be. And for a little while, we were all very happy. We were working from home, going on hybrid mode, this and that. But again, we get to hear of this, whole new sort of discourse around work commitments, with some known technocrats talking about, like Narayan Murthy, saying that it's 70 hours work weeks are just about fine. So are we sort of oscillating between extremes, or we have, while some parts of the world is speaking about 4 days work week, we are speaking about a 70-hour work week. So what is the median?
No, I don't think the number of hours, whether it's 70 hours or 65 or 75 hours, by itself is a problem. I work 75 hours a week or so, but I'm happy doing the way I do, because I have a freedom and the flexibility to kind of decide where, how, and when I work. And I think that's the essence. Calling people back to the office and making them sit in the office for 70 hours is brutal. And I think that is really concerning, Sharmila. I think it kind of suggests, without naming names, it kind of suggests quite an unhealthy, I think, work-life balance. And I think there's a lot of potential for burnouts there. And I think at the same time, Sharmila, I think it's very important to recognize that I don't think we should call this kind of like an average that represents the average experience across all industries or companies. We work with a lot of tech companies as well, and we definitely don't see this as an average where people are being called back to the office and asked to sit for 60, 70 hours. No, I think people do have a lot of flexibility in deciding where, how, and where they work. And it's not even statistically going to work for a lot of companies, Sharmila, because a lot of companies have actually optimized their real estate footprint in such a way that even if they call people back to the office and ask them to sit for 8 hours a day in the office, they won't have the space, because the spaces have been redesigned.
Yes.
On the machines in the office to actually do that.
Yeah,
so I think ultimately, it's finding a kind of like a sustainable balance between productivity and employee well-being, which will really be very, very crucial at this point in time. And every organization, like you mentioned, have to find their own sweet spot there.
Yeah. In the book Work Made Easy, you have sort of created a prototype. I saw that, how you can put in some processes and put in some checks and balances to create a prototype for simplification and implementation of ideas and execution. If you can, explain that for our audience, that typical model that you've written.
The audience will have to read our book for that, but I can. So the book essentially has two parts, Sharmila, as you would remember. The first part is the why, the reason for doing this. Why do we need to do this? And the second part actually gives a framework on how to do it. But as you go through those items in the framework and part, you'll realize a lot of organizational leaders will realize that, hey, I'm already doing this. Maybe I'm not doing this. What we're creating is connecting a link between the why and the how. So they begin to see that, they're doing this for a particular reason. The framework, it's just a framework. Every organization, I'm not saying it will fit for everyone, but they get the framework and they will actually have to pick up items which they feel will be aligned to their organization's vision. Now, the changes in the workplace and even in the business scenario has been so dynamic, Sharmila, you know that I think it'll be prudent for one not to kind of bring about tectonic changes, if I may use that word, in organizations all of a sudden, because there'll be so much of resistance that it's likely to fail. The expectation of failure could be very high. So what we have recommended is that instead of taking this as a silver bullet and kind of deploying it within your organization, take the prototyping approach and not even the pilot approach. We are saying take an approach where you prototype something, then do the pilot, and then consider running it across the organization. Now, for example, let's say, there are many examples, but even if you want to deploy, let's say, a new tech solution, a work tech solution. So a pilot essentially means that you probably want to try this for one branch or one office within your organization. And if it's successful, you run it across the organization. But we are saying, even before you go to the pilot stage, think about prototyping that. Okay, can I test it out with 2 or 3 employees? What do they say? Okay, or can I try one component of the tech solution? Is it working fine? And I follow this prototype approach not only for any changes, but if I can adopt it as an organizational a culture of prototyping in everything that I do, I think it'll not only save a lot of money, but I think you'll not make big mistakes. You will also, I think, be much more productive than you would otherwise be.
Design thinking also is in those who are sort of building teams or organizations with the implementation of design thinking are also saying that there is a lot of need to implant or sort of install empathy in how you do stuff, be it any sort of operation. But it's easier said than done, right? Because we've come with a whole heritage and the world is so big on productivity, etc. But where do you think there's post-pandemic workplaces need a certain EQ, which is not emotional quotient, but empathy quotient in the workplaces?
Yeah, I don't know what you read the book, but I'm assuming that you saw a bit of empathy infused into the suggestions that you have given in the book. It may look like a book which is leaning more towards AI, but when we began writing the book with John and Raj, we quite early realized that it's about people putting first in organizations. I think management science traditionally, Sharmila, has been written from an employer's perspective. We believe that post-pandemic things have changed. The there's been a shift of power, and it is about employees. And it's not something which is written in management books anymore. It's a dialogue that you can tom tom. It's something which you need to practice. And we made this like a centerpiece in our book, that it has to be employees first. And everything in the book, every suggestion is essentially based around that. And like you rightly said, when you take an employee first approach, it's empathy which comes in. And empathy essentially means that you really need to know the aspirations of the end user, of the people who actually end up being in your office or working from home for your organization. And how do you understand the needs and aspirations? There's only one way to do that, and that is, access to data about people. Of course, there are privacy issues around this, but is there data that you can tap into? Is there big data within organizations that I can tap onto? Is there small data within organizations about the people that I can tap onto? And thereby, by understanding people's needs and aspirations, I can actually give to them what they really need, what they true, and which are aligned to their true aspirations. And I think this is what essentially the book is all about. It's about tapping onto data about employees and then delivering to them personalized services, almost like, in a hotel scenario, almost like in the hospitality industry, because the average office worker who's coming to the office is today somebody who's expecting experiences, that they're not coming there just for the work or the money. And to deliver experiences which do not fail, whatever may be the situation, you really need to know your employees very, very well. And that requires empathy, that requires access to data. So this book is about data-driven approaches to our employees.
So during the pandemic, we saw this great resignation where, people sort of hung up their boots and said that, enough is enough and we would rather go off grid or do something else. But then very soon people again started rejoining the workforce. So this is a very confusing state of affairs. And I see the youngsters and they've got very limited thresholds. They just, resign quickly. So what, to your mind, is the future of work? Because clearly priorities have changed.
Yes, they have changed. I think, again, this cannot really be generalized. People do have more choice. I think bottom line is that people, they do realize that they have a lot more choice today than they had yesterday. This was, I guess, even before the pandemic, but people did not realize that. They've just kind of exercised their right today. Pretty much very similar to, I think, the way consumers in consumer marketing realized that they have a choice in the early 2000s and all of that. I think it's kind of aligned to that. Future of work, I'm no soothsayer to actually kind of predict what the future of work is, but I think there are various trends which are emerging as we speak, Sharmila. Remote and hybrid work is a thing that we cannot shy away from. I think digital transformation, the way it is happening. In fact, when we first wrote the book, the kind of digital stuff that we wrote about in the book is very different from what eventually emerged, because that is how fast the topics were changing, how digital transformation was taking. And this will continue to accelerate. You spoke earlier about the 70-hour week. I think the focus on employee well-being will continue. Different organizations will read that and work on that very differently. The other thing that, we continuously are asked, and I'm sure you also faced the question, that will AI wipe away jobs? So that actually leads us to this whole question about skills and continuous learning. So upskilling, it's quite scary, right? Will I become irrelevant in 2 months' time if I don't? So I think that's skill development will be a big focus. The other thing, Sharmila, I think this has become reality. This was something which is more like a slogan earlier, but diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a big term. So it's a lot of things. I think eventually, I guess, like I referred to, access to employee data. The average employee will and even today continues to come to work expecting an experience, which I think is moving towards personalization. And so the future of work is likely to be highly personalized and probably characterized by things like flexibility, choice, technology-driven innovation, and I think a lot of focus on employee well-being. I think nobody wants to work 70 hours in the office, Sharmila.
Thank you so much for your time. It's a very timely book, and it's something that people should pick up and read. And I just have it right here. And so good read, and yeah, it's both for the employer. Yeah, we can both hold it up together like this.